Have you ever wondered what Team Fortress would be to Fortress 2 without? I think we all have, to be quite honest. I mean, think about it, weapons are the backbone of the entire Team Fortress 2 ecosystem. Everything revolves around them. Every YouTube video, except for the ones where you harass people, quite a few of the updates, much of the evolution of the game design came from weapons, and they capture the imagination of the entire audience. People still watch weapon reviews of weapons they've already seen reviewed 4 times, because they are that interesting, apparently. But sometimes I wonder, I mean not really, but I have to say that for the video, is Team Fortress 2's weapon design really going in the correct direction? Or was it going in the correct direction? Was the method of green text, red text, with positives and negatives that slightly alter a basically universal baseline weapon really the best way to go? What would have happened if Team Fortress 2 had been even more experimental than it was? Will the girl whose bed I'm living under ever reward me for watching her sleep with such dedication? But here's the thing, is that these are not hypothetical. You don't have to wonder, because it's been made. That's right. Team Fortress 2 Classic. It's like Team Fortress 2, but without all of the updates. But then, some of the updates, and then some more updates that weren't made by Valve. And it is quite interesting. One of the major advantages I think that Team Fortress 2 Classic has over Team Fortress 2 is that it's not Team Fortress 2. It's almost exactly the same game, but it's not. It isn't bound by any of the restrictions or the heredity that Team Fortress was bound by. You could basically take Team Fortress and put it in an entirely new direction, look at it with an entirely new lens. And much like my crossbow ghost hunting career, came out with some interesting results. And I'd like to talk about this approach to weapon design, and in general game design as a whole, versus what Team Fortress 2 did. Now first off, let's talk about Team Fortress 2. Relatively famously, at least within the community, Team Fortress 2 designed a lot of its weapons around basically taking the stock option and then applying what are effectively modifiers to it. For example, the black box. The black box in function is almost identical to a rocket launcher. The only real changes are that you have 3 rockets instead of 4, and that you heal for up to 20 damage when you hit somebody with the rockets. And this is how a lot of weapons in Team Fortress 2 are designed: green text and red text. Green text is good stuff, red text is bad stuff. Sometimes you have white text, which is a little bit different, not necessarily good or bad, and of course, not every weapon is like this, but quite a few of them, the majority of them are like this. And overall, Team Fortress 2 did relatively well with this sort of format of designing weapons. A lot of Team Fortress 2's weapons are very good, and basing your new weapons on an existing framework has a lot of advantages. For one thing, it typically helps rein in the power, since it still functions similar to another weapon, though not always. But also, having a direct comparison in the form of the original stock weapon you're now modifying makes it so that you can very clearly see if what you've made is a little too powerful. At least, again, in most cases. And secondly, it also helps to make weapons very readable. Because there's like 9 rocket launchers that are all just kind of shooting rockets but with slight modifiers, you still generally know what each one of them does. You don't have to learn like 9 completely different weapons, because many of the strategies that apply to one of them will apply to all of them. And this often applies to many weapons within the same classification, such as miniguns, grenade launchers, etc. Syringe guns, you know, if you swing that way. Look, I'm not judging you, there's nothing to judge about that, you know, but the moment June is over, I'm gonna become the most spiteful, hateful son of a bitch on the fucking planet, and you're first. For example, Heavy's various miniguns. The strategy to dealing with Heavy is typically to be able to break the line of sight. Heavy has to take a second to deploy his minigun, where he's vulnerable and cannot shoot back. But once he's deployed, if he's looking at you, he can deal a lot of damage in a sustained fire. But if you can break the line of sight, obviously he then cannot shoot you, because it's a hit scan weapon, it can't go around corners, and he has to then either undeploy and then redeploy by moving to you, or stay where he is, and obviously if he stays where he is, you can just leave and not have to deal with him. So classic tricks like walking up to a cosplayer that you like at a convention and grabbing their arm and saying, "Hi," or stutter stepping from around a corner over and over and over again so that Heavy cannot get a lock on you, still work because a lot of the miniguns are basically the same. And this is really good news for new players. This means you don't have to learn like 186 completely different weapons to be able to play Team Fortress 2. You can learn strategies about one that will translate over to another, which helps you have strategy and agency over a match earlier. But there are some deficiencies of this overall strategy. The advantages are good, but there are a lot of times where weapons simply don't come out remarkable because they're just modifications of an existing base. And some of the best weapons in Team Fortress 2 are the ones that had no base and were just completely experimental on their own, like the shields for the Demo Man, which effectively made an entire new class, almost at least. Now of course not every experimental weapon is good. For example, Girardi is really stupid, but I wonder, If more weapons were more like shields, rather than being like the fan of war or something, would the game be better? And what's very convenient is that Team Fortress 2 Classic designs many of its weapons more like shields than Team Fortress 2 did. Like the Demo Man's dynamite cluster that allows him to throw this pack of dynamite over a short arc, which after a second will explode, and then leave 4 smaller bombs which will explode around the same position. A weapon with effectively no equivalence or even cousin in the entire game. And there are many weapons like that, like the engineer's buildable jump pads, which, if an ally jumps over them, gives them a rocket jumper-esque boost into the air, allowing them to then fall safely back onto the ground, providing your team with a lot of upward momentum and a lot of mobility, even for classes who don't normally have any, like a heavy. Or the Scout's nail gun, which is fashioned after his beta weapon before they added the scattergun, which plays nothing like a scattergun and forces you to genuinely play the Scout in a completely different way, playing at different ranges and to the strengths of your weapon, because you can now hit further out, but you lack that really good burst damage that scatterguns give you. And overall, the inclusions that the Team Fortress 2 Classic team have made are really cool. The strong part of this more wacky
I cannot believe Kaluka would make a gross noise. His career is over.
What a complete and irredeemable loser. I will tell all my internet friends about this monumental failure.
He should kill himself with a big rock that says suicide on it. This joke seems excessive for something you can just cut out easily.
The strong part of this more wacky weapon design, in my opinion, is that even if a weapon isn't the most efficient, it comes out usually very interesting. Now, we've already spoken about how Valve basically takes a stock weapon as a base and then modifies it, and why there are advantages to this, especially for newer players. But also, in doing so, it's obviously just by nature very possible for a weapon to end up being kinda similar to the main gun, in a way that isn't really interesting or more fun in my opinion. For example, the Libertarian Launcherian and the Pretty Boy's Pocket Pistol. Two weapons which are very similar to their stock counterparts and which, in my opinion, do not really create new ways of playing the game. Now, they do change how you play in small ways, that is kind of the whole point of how Valve designed these weapons, but in a lot of cases I don't think that really manifests in a playstyle that is very different from the original weapon. The Pretty Boy's Pocket Pistol especially is basically exactly like the stock, except that you get to heal when you shoot people, so it's kinda just better. You're still just using it to clean up kills, out of desperation, or to shoot more at the mid-range because the pistol is more accurate at a longer range than the scattergun is, or just out of sheer desperation. It's basically the pistol except it rewards you more by giving you healing, which frankly you shouldn't just get by using the pistol the exact same way you use the other pistols. You just have to do something like especially skillful or something like that to get free healing. But I digest. The Liberty Launcher is the same. You use the Liberty Launcher pretty much exactly the same way you would use a rocket launcher. It has a couple of advantages, but none that I think that regular rocket launchers can't do almost just as well, and there's a lot of cases where I think some of these advantages aren't really advantages at all. The Liberty Launcher has an extra rocket, and also has a lot of rocket jumping freedom, basically. The extra rocket means you can jump and then still have 4 rockets to enter a situation with, and also you go further when you rocket jump with the Liberty Launcher compared to other rocket launchers, and also shooting people with this rocket launcher makes them bounce up higher than normal stock rocket launchers do. But a couple of things. The stock rocket launchers also do these things. It's not like you can't rocket jump very well with the regular rocket launcher, and also the regular rocket launcher does also bounce people up, and it bounces people up well enough to use the reserve shooter, which the Liberty Launcher was designed to be used with. It was also designed to be used with the Market Gardener, obviously more rocket jump force, and therefore more airtime and more controllability and so forth, pair very well with the Market Gardener, but you can also use the Market Gardener very well with the stock. And it's not like the Liberty Launcher is so especially good at these things that you're highly incentivized to take it over other options if this is the kind of gameplay you want to get across. Anything you can do with a Liberty Launcher, you can do with every other rocket launcher except maybe the direct hit. Except arguably better because all of those rocket launchers don't have minus 25% damage, which is a big deal. Anything you can do with this, they can do better, so why pick this one? You end up using it exactly as you would all these other weapons because all these other weapons can do the exact same techniques that you want to do with the Liberty Launcher. After having having played with it for a while, I didn't really see myself doing anything differently that I wouldn't have done with stock, other than getting really fucking bored. Compare this to something like the Beggar's Bazooka. Like, the Beggar's Bazooka is not the best weapon in most cases. In fact, in almost any case, it's really not very good, but it is interesting. In fact, this is one of the more common criticisms with Heavy. He's got like 6 miniguns, but all of them kinda do the same thing, and none of them really create a new playstyle for the Heavy. No matter which gun you pick, you're still just holding down M1 and looking at people. You're 24, you don't pay rent, and all you do is shoot people with miniguns all day. I think it's about time you grew up, Bill. And this is frankly much more common in Team Fortress 2 than it is in Team Fortress 2 Classic. By virtue of effectively sheer experimentation, Classic ends up with more, in my opinion, interesting weapons. Not all of them are necessarily the best, but they are definitely different. Now, of course, this isn't like a linear exchange. It's not like the more weird and experimentational you get, then the more you disappoint your parents. What matters more so than anything is the quality of the design that goes into it, whether that be by making a weapon that's completely unique or just modifying an existing thing. Again, the Market Gardener, in my opinion, the most well-designed weapon in the entirety of Team Fortress 2, is just a modification of the shovel. It truly is the merit of what you make, and not necessarily the means that you use to make it, no matter what the disgruntled ghost of Al Sharpton says while you sleep. But with all of that said, I think that the inherent freedom of being able to basically just do whatever you want lends itself to having more creative and, again, more interesting results. For example, if you were remixing the grenade launchers, it would be very easy to end up with something that is just like the grenade launcher, rather than making something that is totally unique. You totally can make something interesting simply by modifying the base, as we've said, but it's very easy not to. And I know that this is the case because they already did this, namely with, in my opinion, the Iron Bomber and the Lock and Load. Now, I know that this is Team Fortress 2, and this community is incredibly overly obsessive of this game and the weapons in it. And I know that I'm going to be told all 7 different use cases in which the Iron Bomber is very different and much more useful than the other grenade launchers, because apparently shutting the fuck up never crossed some of your minds, but the Iron Bomber really does not need to be a gun. At least not in its current state. Yes, not being able to roll your pills is sometimes bad. Not having your pills roll away from you is sometimes good, but aside from that, the Iron Bomber is an incredibly light remix of stock, to the point where I don't even see why it's a gun. It's practically a reskin, and I don't really get the point. The most significant thing about this gun was back when it was bugged. The Lock and Load, even though it's not really that different, rewards different kinds of skills and forces you to change how you play, in a substantial way, and it proves that you don't have to change much about a weapon to be able to change a lot about the game. The Iron Bomber, on the other hand, is not really that different from the stock grenade launcher, and you don't really use it in a different way. You still play Demo Man pretty much the exact same way. The only difference, again, is your relationship with rollers. And yes, I know, sometimes it's useful, I get it. That doesn't make the weapon fun.
Nor, in my opinion, does it make it particularly interesting. And I think weapons like the Lock and Load overall make a better argument for how weapons should be designed. And of course, this isn't just between grenade launchers, this is between all kinds of weapons. Scatterguns, rocket launchers, grenade launchers, miniguns, sniper rifles, enchanted longswords, syringe guns, whatever rock happens to be nearby when you see your ex-wife, and revolvers. And of course, mind you, it's not like Team Fortress 2 doesn't succeed in having interesting weapons. Of course it does. You've got your Market Gardeners and your Crits Kriegs and, your Phlogistonators if you're a complete fucking dillweed, but not all of them are. Now, that being said, if I am correct, and it's more so the execution of what you do rather than the method of design, then that means that there should be some examples where experimental weapons are bad, and relatively tame ones are not, and of course this is the case. The Wrangler is a more experimental weapon, but is terrible in execution, mostly over the fact that it's quite overtuned. But frankly, I think it's better to make a weapon that tries to do something interesting and maybe fails, than something that isn't exciting at all. Of course, it's not like trying to be different prevents your weapon from becoming a spectacular failure. For example, the Gas Passer. Now, the Gas Passer is a spectacular failure of a weapon. In fact, it's probably one of the most famous examples of a bad weapon in Team Fortress 2. The weapon simply isn't efficient enough to allow you to actually do the game plan that it's trying to promote. It's not that the idea is bad, it's just that the weapon simply doesn't work. And this sort of expresses a dichotomy in Team Fortress 2. Let me ask you a question. What kind of bad weapons do you want Team Fortress 2 to be filled with? Do you want it to be filled with stuff like the Gas Passer, or the Hitman's Heatmaker? Now, in this context, bad means two different things. For the Gas Passer, bad means just inefficient, the weapon is simply weak. And for the Hitman's Heatmaker, bad means that it's just poorly designed. And I have to say, there's good arguments for both sides of this. Not wanting the game to be filled with Gas Passers is very fair. I mean, after all, having the game be filled with a bunch of weapons that are so weak that they don't even get across the kind of gameplay that they're trying to get across sounds pretty rough.
Almost as rough as being a delivery driver is going to be during the next economic crisis. Cause let me tell you, I'm sooner buying a revolver than I'm spending $24,000 on a GTX 5090.
It's totally reasonable to want guns in the game to work, but that being said, is it really any better for the game to be filled with Hitman's heatmakers? Is it really better for the game to be filled with a bunch of mediocre, uninspired, and kind of boring weapons that don't really capture the imagination in any way? Wasn't kind of the entire point of Team Fortress 2's weapon design to avoid becoming yet another game where we have a giant swath of weapons that are all kind of the same?
I mean, well, yeah, of course it is. The Hitmaker Manmaker is an actual weapon. It still, like, works, but it's still not preferable. In fact, I think it was the willingness to experiment that made Team Fortress 2 so successful compared to many of its competitors, in my opinion. And it's one of the greatest strengths of this game. But there are definitely times where Team Fortress 2 went the mile, and ones where they kinda drunkenly fell down the stairs. Like with the Winger, a weapon who individually is lacking in inspiration, to say the least, but which does showcase something interesting about Team Fortress 2's weapon design, and that's the ability to combine weapons into different combos or to create new subclasses. Now, I'll go over this again in a minute, but I will say that this is something that Team Fortress 2 does objectively better than Team Fortress 2 Classic. There's just not enough weapons in Classic to be able to really make a lot of different combos. In fact, there's really not many combos at all. Now, I also don't think that this really harms Team Fortress 2 Classic necessarily because of the quality of the weapons, but it is something that Team Fortress 2 just does better. But the thing is that we don't also just have to talk about hypotheticals. We do have a tangible game to look at, and if we're going to compare the weapon design of each of these games, we might as well, like, actually look at the weapons they have. But before we do, a word from our sponsor. Are you a gamer? Are you tired of chewing tobaccos that no longer give you that exhilarating reprieve from withdrawal? Are you feeling exhausted, dehydrated, and horny after a long gaming session? Then let me tell you about exhilarating new Gamer Chew. Gamer Chew is the only chewing tobacco for gamers. Featuring high dosages of protein, electrolytes, and glycol, one pouch of Gamer Chew is sure to have you back in the game. Learn to reinvigorate your love for the single most pointless and damaging drug ever invented by going to the official GamerChewWish.com store and using code KALUKA for 10% off of an order of 500 cases. Now, earlier we talked about weapon combinations and the ability to make your own subclasses. This is something that Team Fortress 2 Classic is objectively worse at, simply because there's more weapons in Team Fortress 2 to combine into new combos. Now, with that said, I would also say that the weapons in Team Fortress 2 Classic are also so individually unique and interesting that they kind of create their own playstyles without any help, which overall I think is a much stronger position to be in since you don't need to make more than one weapon, and also no individual weapon relies on another weapon to be interesting. Allow me to give you some examples. First off, the Mine Layer. This is one of my favorite new additions to the game. Imagine the Scottish Resistance, except it's completely automated, and you only get 4 grenades. That's pretty much what the Mine Layer does. Instead of laying down sticky bombs, you lay down mines. When people on the enemy team or yourself get near the mines, they explode after a second. And since they explode on their own, that means that you can just lay them down somewhere and then not have to deal with them anymore. Now, the sticky bomb launcher is still a lot better. Having 8 shots is just vastly superior to 4, and also being able to jump and detonate on command is way better. But this is still a really fun alternative playstyle. You basically just fire and forget these little mines, and then get to run around with your grenade launcher, which in my opinion is way more fun than sticky spam. So if you don't like doing that, or you need to really defend like multiple areas at once, this weapon's great.
And it does all of this without relying on another weapon like the Bushwhacker,
while also being substantially different than stock, unlike something like the Southern Hospitality. And you don't even have to deal with a Badlands Chupacabra, or any of the worst combos in Team Fortress 2, such as Black Box plus Conqueror, which is known as Penis Combo, Girani plus Bushwhacker, which is known as Pisswhacker, or the Conscientious Objector plus Child Pornography, which is known as... But yeah, anyway, this is also a double-edged sword. Obviously, even though you don't have any of the bad weapons from Live TF2, you also don't have any of the good ones, such as, of course, the Mario Gardener, the Crusader Crossar, or the Ambassador, and of course the Eyelander. And overall, the ecosystem of weapons is really good in Classic. It is a bit sparse. There are definitely times where I wish there were alternatives to many stock weapons like the Syringe Gun, because the Syringe Gun sucks, and even though the ecosystem is really good right now, I will say just by sheer volume of good stuff, Team Fortress 2 still wins out for me, just by a bit. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think Team Fortress 2 Classic is just like a couple of updates away, as long as they can maintain the level of quality from being genuinely better than Team Fortress 2. A few more good guns and a few more good maps, and this will be genuinely a very good competitor for the live game. But yeah, that's pretty much it. This is just a little look-see into how these two different things design their weapons for what is effectively the same game at the core. Team Fortress 2 Classic is also in a very unique position to have a lot of potential. It's like being able to remake Team Fortress 2 but without all the shittiest updates, and instead with updates from a competent team that are willing to push the boundaries. Hopefully as Team Fortress 2 Classic, it gets filled with more stuff like the jump pads or the coil gun, rather than like the Shahanshah. And yes, commenters, I know it has good use cases, please stop! But yeah, Team Fortress 2 has really good weapon design. In most cases, I stand by that statement. And Team Fortress 2 Classic is doing a very good job as well. And the team's willingness and so far capability to make weapons that are a little odd or push the boundaries are really good. Again, Team Fortress 2 Classic comes with a high recommendation for me. It's really cool. I hope the team continues the track that they're on, because they could make something really fantastic. Thank you all for watching. This video was a bit of an impromptu one, and next time we will talk about something.